Hello, welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Becca, and today I have my best first books in series. So, on Goodreads there is a group called Monthly Recommendations. I first saw this on Murphy Napier's channel, and I will link her video for this prompt down below, as well as the Goodreads group if you want to join. And essentially every month they post a prompt, and it is a recommendation prompt. So this month it is the best first books in series. It doesn't matter how many books you have, if you have 2, if you have 20, they don't care. Just make a video or a blog post or an Instagram post or whatever about the prompt and then leave it in their sort of forum topic on the Goodreads group. And yeah, so this is my best first books in series. So first up, of course, we have Nevernight. I feel like I'm now mentioning this in every single video, and it isn't even really intentional. Not only is this one of my favourite first books in series, it is also my favourite first page of a book. Just to give you a bit of an idea, the first line is, "People often shit themselves when they die." And it's sort of like the last paragraph of the page that gets me. And it says, "A girl some called Pale Daughter, or Kingmaker, or Crow, but most often nothing at all. A killer of killers whose tally of endings only the goddess and I truly know. And was she famous or infamous for it at the end, or this death? I confess I could never see the difference, but then I've never seen things the way you have. Never truly lived in the world you call your own, nor did she really. I think that's why I loved her." And that was just got me hooked right from the very first page. Obviously, you all know that Nevernight is about a girl who joins a school of assassins in order to take revenge for her family, who were killed and imprisoned when she was just a child. She managed to escape, and she's taken in by a guy who sort of acts as her mentor, and eventually she joins the assassin school to become an assassin in order to kill the people that were responsible for the murder and imprisonment of her family. This book is like chock full of sarcasm and wit. It's got a lot of gore. There's some sexual content. The characters are morally grey, and you end up falling in love with the bad ones and hating the good ones. I just think it's an absolute work of genius. Love this series so much, and one of the best first books I've ever read. Next up we have The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. At the time that this came out, I think it kickstarted a whole new sort of subgenre of YA, with the dystopian children all fight to the death kind of thing. At the time that I'd read this, I had already seen it before in Battle Royale, which I guess is where Suzanne Collins got the idea from to write this book. Battle Royale is also a great film, and I would recommend that you watch it. It is in Japanese with subtitles, but it's so good. And Hunger Games is sort of a YA version of that film that's obviously Americanized, and I just love the whole concept, as brutal and sinister as it is, of a country that sort of takes 24 children from its population and just puts them in an arena and fights to the death. At the time it was released, I think it was kind of new and exciting, and even now I still think it's really good. A lot of people don't like Mockingjay. I didn't really mind it. I'm not among the haters of the book, but I think the whole series is great as a whole, but The Hunger Games as a standalone is also really good. Also just realised that I'm holding Mockingjay and not The Hunger Games, but you all know what the original book looks like, so yeah. Next we have Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. You've heard me mention this before. This is about a world where the population is sort of divided by the colour of your blood. So poor people have red bloods and they're just like normal humans. And there's a silver elite that have silver bloods and also special powers. And one of the red blood girls, who is the main character, Mare Barrow, sort of stumbles across having powers that she shouldn't have because she has red blood, and from there she's taken into the silver world, and they try and pass her off as a silver, while they and also the girl herself try and work out why this has happened and what's going on. There's a lot of political intrigue in this book. There's a lot of betrayal. I think that this is a really good first book because when you start it and you're reading this book, you don't know anything about the previous books in the series because it is the start, and so everything's like more shocking and there's more plot twists, whereas as you continue on with the series you've learned to expect the betrayals, so you sort of don't trust anything you're reading, whereas in this it comes as like a complete surprise. I was surprised to find out that a lot of people on BookTube don't like this series. They think that it's nothing special and it's just full of tropes, but I really loved it. I think this is the book that sort of introduced me to the high fantasy aspect of YA and has shaped the books that I'm going into now, which is adult high fantasy, and I don't think that I would have gone there if I hadn't have read this. I think I still would have been reading supernatural romance and dystopian and contemporaries, so I'm glad that this book exists, and I think it's really, really great. The second book is sort of the low point of the series so far. This on its own was amazing and I really enjoyed it. Next we have Cinder by Marissa Meyer, which is probably the first sci-fi that I read that wasn't The Host. This one is about a girl who is part robot. I think, is she a cyborg? Yep, she's a cyborg, and she has some of her brain is computerized, and I know she has a robot foot and some other parts. And this is set far into the future in, I think, is it New Beijing? Where the world has sort of been torn apart by a war and then put back together. So all the countries are still sort of the same, but not really. And people live on the moon. There's a colony on the moon. And every book in this series sort of follows a different character but links up to a greater plot, which I really enjoyed. But the reason that I think this is a really good first book is because it's such a unique world, or at least it was coming from me who had never read any sci-fi. The characters in this are absolutely phenomenal, and I went into this like expecting nothing from it. From the write-up and the front cover, I thought it was sort of aimed at the younger end of YA, and I wasn't really excited about reading it, but I was completely swept away. The world building is great. The sort of hints to other things that only come to fruition later on in the series, when I got to later on in the series, I thought was really, really well done. This series also has one of the best villains that I've ever encountered, and she is in the first book. And the best thing about this series and this book is how it is the start of something that becomes much bigger, much more intricate and really well developed. I just think it's a great introduction to a series, a great series as a whole, and I would recommend that anybody read these. And last up we have a little bit of a controversial one, because it is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. Now, I know everybody hates this and everybody loves A Court of Mist and Fury, but I loved this series from the very first book. When I read this in 2014, it became my favourite book ever. I was absolutely obsessed. I was so in love with Tamlin. I thought that the way that it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling is really well done. I enjoyed the world building and learning more about this complex world between where the world is split between fairies and humans. I loved all of the lesser fairies, sort of the different species, and I loved the high fae. I loved the relationship between Lucian and Feyre. Like I said a million times, I will always love like a brooding love interest, so I was like so in love with Tamlin. I loved the way that Feyre evolved from being somebody who felt like, even though she took care of her family, she felt like all she ever wanted was someone to look after her. I enjoyed her evolution into somebody who felt like she could save somebody else and would go to the ends of the earth to save the person that she loved. And yeah, I just thought that this was a great book. I thought it was great as a standalone. I was really worried about A Court of Mist and Fury being released, because I thought this was better on its own and would be ruined by a sequel. So the way that I kind of view the series as a whole right now is I view this as a standalone, and in my head I like to leave it as that, as like the romance between Feyre and Tamlin, and sort of pretend that it ends with and they lived happily ever after and that is it. And I view A Court of Mist and Fury as a different series with A Court of Wings and Ruin. But at the time I thought this was perfect, and I do love A Court of Mist and Fury, but in a completely different way. I think this is perfect on its own and a great first book in a series. I'm sure a lot of you have read this, or at least attempted to read it, and I'm also sure a lot of you disagree with me. But for me, this is amazing and I love it, and I would recommend it to you guys. So that's everything for my best first books in series. I will leave the links to the Goodreads group below so that you can join in and see the prompts. If you like this video, then please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you want to. And if you head into the down bar below, you will find my links to Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those. Please let me know in a comment below what you thought of any of these books and what your number one first book in a series would be. That's everything from me today. Bye!
Thank you.